Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the performance finance for the 6th of March. Have we got any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies from Councillor Nirmal Kang. Councillor Julie Hode is subbing.
Thank you. And the minutes from the previous meeting, are we happy to accept those minutes? Any comments? Okay, I'll sign those now. Okay, item 3, declarations of interest. I will kick off. Item 7.13 on page 42, Club Dean. I've volunteered and have given some of my councillor award grant money there as well, and my daughter goes there. So that's 3 non-pecuniaries. Anyone else? Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, Chair, just remembered. I made a donation to the Hope Hub, and it's mentioned in the notes.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. Okay, so on to item 4, public questions. I believe we've got one public question tonight. Mr. Bain, you know how to use the equipment. So if you ask your question, I will read the answer out, and if you have a supplementary, we can go from there. Okay, thanks a lot. The floor is yours.
Good evening, sir. My question is, Councillor Mrs. Sabi King previously asked a question in the Council Chamber at the Executive Committee meeting held on the 16th of January 2024 on my behalf that I was denied the opportunity to put myself about the unspent committed budget for partial remedial works to address water flows and regular flooding in Pennypot Lane. My attention is drawn to Table 3 attached to Capital Budget 2023-2024, which is in part looking at future commitments, but it would appear under item CO7010, Pennypot Lane, £40,000 is listed under surrendered scheme budgets. Taken literally, this might imply that the funding is now withdrawn. Such action would not be consistent with the verbal answer given to Councillor Mrs. King. Would the Chairman hazard a guess as to what's going on?
Thank you, Mr. Bain, for your question. I've spoken to the officers, and the officers have given the following answer to your question. A revised design for the Pennypot Lane flood alleviation works is now underway. The latest proposals are substantially different to the original works, involving construction within the highway and considering potential improvements to the main river capacity. An updated schedule of construction costs and responsibility will be provided once the design is agreed. Works related to the main river or flood capacity are likely to attract environmental agency funding. The remaining Surrey Heath Borough Council contribution is expected to be no higher than was previously agreed at £40,000. Funded from the drainage reserve, a further update will be provided in due course in relation to the next steps on this project in the coming months. Do you have a supplementary to that?
I do, sir. Thank you very much for the answer. I assume from what you've said that there is still a situation where Surrey Heath is going to put its shoulder to the wheel. Yesterday, for the benefit of the members, Wayne Purden, the borough drainage engineer, came to my house. He's been there many times over the last 6 years, and we discussed a scheme which is different, as you say, to the original scheme, and I think it's a better scheme. But a word of warning, I would be very anxious about the Environment Agency's commitment, because it's due to them that the development in West End of 400 houses took place, which was contrary to the advice of both Wayne Purden and the Planning Department of Surrey Heath Borough Council. And furthermore, what was previously the floodplain for Pennypot Lane, namely Field 81, was covered by thousands, hundreds of thousands of tons of hardcore, which the EA and this council, in a joint press release, agreed to clear. Unfortunately, the EA did not come up with the money, and it was left to this council to perform a clean-up measure, which has not really done the job, but we're talking about big, big money, and I'm very encouraged by the answer that I've given, and I look forward to seeing developments.
Thank you, Mr. Bain. I don't know if Mr. China, who's on the call, would like to comment on that.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Bone, for your further question in regards to this matter. I've spoken to Mr. Purdon today about this matter, and I know he's come to your property, I think yesterday, I believe, to discuss this matter further. And I take on board your comments raised about the Environment Agency. I am assured by Mr. Purdon that we are having constructive discussions with EA about future plans and future developments. I can't give you a firm time frame of when this is going to happen. Obviously, as we know, there are backlogs occurring in EA, and we have to work through that process accordingly. So from my perspective, I will be urging myself with Mr. Purdon to keep on with EA so this project comes forward in the near future. I hope that gives you some assurance going forwards.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Bain, for your question. Thank you. Okay, so that takes us to item 5 on the agenda, which is Executive Portfolio Update, Inclusion and Housing. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm pleased to present the Inclusion and Housing Portfolio Update. This is a wide and varied portfolio which I've been honoured to have the pleasure of delivering along with our brilliant officers over the last 10 months. The portfolio is critical for our borough as it supports some of the most vulnerable in our community. You have the report in your agenda pack, and I'd like to thank the officers for all their work in putting it together for you. I will pick out some key headlines. Our Home Improvement Agency continues to deliver an incredibly efficient service through adaptations which support independent living and allow people to remain in their homes. For the first time in 5 years, the service will spend its full grant and has already exceeded its target for the number of adaptations delivered by over 25%. And I'm delighted to see the target being exceeded for the second year in a row, and I'd like to congratulate the team for delivering this service so effectively. Demand on our homelessness and emergency accommodation services is on the increase, with a 15% increase in approaches over the previous year. Whilst this demand is increasing, you will see from the table in 3.6 that our reliance on bed and breakfast accommodation is low. This is testament to the superb work of our housing solutions team. Our numbers of rough sleepers remain largely consistent, and through the use of our own accommodation and partnership working with the Hope Hub, the service is effective in securing funding to support our homeless people into permanent accommodation. We're very proud to have recently published the Achieving Equity strategy. We've now established the Achieving Equity Forum, made up of representatives from organisations working with minority groups and our own Engaging Communities Working Group to develop an action plan which will form part of the annual plan next year. As a council, we are extremely grateful to all the organisations working with us to help us ensure that we are working effectively towards true equity for all, and I'd like to thank them for their continued contributions. The Executive have agreed the spend on our revenue grant holders, and this was confirmed in the budget agreed at full council in February. In addition to revenue grants, we've updated the criteria for our ward councillor grants and our community grant schemes to ensure that spend on these are consistent with the council strategy, also agreed at full council. We'd particularly like to thank Citizens Advice Surrey Heath for distributing the Household Support Fund on our behalf this year, which we know has made a huge difference to our residents during the cost of living crisis. We're pleased that our community development team are continuing to work with Voluntary Support North Surrey to develop and build on the thriving voluntary sector in the borough. Since September last year, we've run 2 networking events with VSNS for charities to help support them to access funding they need and to learn from each other. And I'd like to extend my thanks to the community development team for all their work, and particularly to Ms France for her work in developing such effective relationships with the community organisations working across our borough. The Family Support Programme continues to deliver an exemplar service for the families of Surrey Heath and Runnymede, exceeding its performance indicators in all areas. As you'll see from the report, whilst this is an uncertain time for the future of our FSP, the officers will go over and above, and I was happy to witness this at Christmas time when we received hampers for the families supported by our FSP officers. Hearing the passion with which they speak about their work and the families they support was incredibly powerful. We continue to support those people fleeing war or persecution through various resettlement schemes, finding them accommodation and assisting with the challenges of moving to an unfamiliar environment, directing them towards essential services and support networks. Our teams do extremely important work, and I have heard firsthand from those receiving support how integral it has been for them. The Home Solutions team consists of just 2 members of staff, one of whom is part-time, but delivers such valuable work, dealing with complaints in the private rented sector, licensing for houses of multiple occupation, hoarding and premises which have harmful impact on immediate neighbours, and dealing with the affairs of a deceased person, including their burial, where there is no next of kin. Before any questions, I would just like to acknowledge the incredible work of all the officers who work so hard for the most vulnerable in Surrey Heath. They do so with great passion and determination, employing incredible skill, often under difficult circumstances, to achieve the best outcomes for people. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'd like to echo those comments. Right, councillors, have we got any questions? Councillor Wilson, then Councillor O'Mahony.
Thank you, Chair. So on inclusion, and I'm sorry, thank you for the report as well. It was really good to read and echo the Chair's comments about the staff. On inclusion, how is the Council planning to mark International Women's Day on Friday? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Well, thank you for asking this question, because it allows me to acknowledge the day and to pay tribute to the women who work so hard in Surrey Heath Borough Council, and actually all our female residents across the borough. The Council will be holding an event for staff on Friday, focusing on women in leadership. I'll be speaking at the event along with other portfolio holders, Cal Finan Cook and Councillor Helen Whitcroft as well. And yeah, we look forward to marking the day. It's extremely important that we do so.
Thank you. Councillor O'Mahony, then Councillor Hode.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just go to page 18, 5.7, Family Support Programme, and the fact that funding's been removed. There's some advice there about Surrey County Council possibly funding that. Have we had any further update positively on that front?
Thank you, Councillor O'Mahony. No, we haven't really, and there's a lot of uncertainty around it. And there's uncertainty for our staff, and there's a lot of variables in play on this one. So the funding for FSP comes from a government grant, and Surrey County Council have limited influence over that. The provider of the agreement has recently changed from the Department of Levelling Up to the Department of Education, apologies, which might give some indication of where the focus is changing. As it stands, the future of that grant is uncertain, and so the SLA has only been extended to March 25. We also don't know if stable homes built on love will have an impact, which it may do, and it may influence the future of family support services across the country. What we do know is that Surrey County Council feel that there is a gap between the statutory services and the services that FSP deliver, and they've developed an intensive family support service to bridge that gap. It's very, they have advertised the roles. The roles appear to be almost identical to what is currently there. And that obviously is creating some uncertainty amongst staff. And, all I can really say at the moment in order to try and reassure our staff is that we are being as open and honest with them as we can be. We're sharing information as and when we have it. And this council has done very well. Mr Roberts has worked very hard and managed to secure regular briefings from Surrey County Council. So we feel that we are in the best position to be getting as up-to-date information as we possibly can. But it is certainly a time of uncertainty.
Thank you, and I just want to echo that. When I was reading this, having been in your position, I was flabbergasted to see that, and the concern is that we have got some really good staff, and if they are unsure of their futures, they will start looking. And I, for one, do not want to lose the staff that we have there, because the job they do is an unbelievable job. So, yeah, happily to echo everything you've just said. Thank you. Right, I've got Councillor Hode, then Councillor Lewis, Councillor Rowlands, and then Councillor Wheeler.
Oops. Oh. Buttons mixed up. Thank you, Chair. Fairly quick questions regarding homelessness stats on page 16. We have what looks to my untutored eye to be a relatively low number of street homeless people, which feels good. do you have any information on how many of our rough sleepers and or single adult homeless residents, how many of them are military veterans? I ask because I often see in social media and what have you comments about veterans who are homeless and on the streets. But then equally I hear that I believe the RMA and the military have strong support services, charities, etc., who can help here. So I'm really just unclear as to the actual true extent of the problem. So I don't know if we have any insight on that either. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holt, for your question and highlighting this particular group who have often given so much to this country and for our liberty and as a result often require additional support. Our housing officers are very good at tapping into every possible resource to help people. One of the questions that they do ask is whether or not people have been involved in our armed forces at all, because we know that there is lots of resource available to them if they are. At the moment, we've 8 rough sleepers. Of the 8, only 1 has a history in the armed forces. It was for a very short time that they served, and that particular person was offered accommodation through a support service for ex-military. Unfortunately, that placement didn't last. But we have, in fairly recent history, been able to place somebody outside of the county. They wanted to break the negative pattern of behaviours that they were in, left the county, and has the success story behind that person is substantial. I won't go into it because it wouldn't be appropriate, but we have had some very significant success. But what I would say is, in short, our officers are brilliant at tapping into the resources for people. They work when the people want them.
Thank you. Councillor Mears is next, then Councillor Rowlands, then Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Fine and Cook and your officers for this report. 7.5, page 24, we identify that our current systems make analysis difficult of problems when it comes to housing complaints. I wonder if we've been able to identify any opportunities where we can improve this reporting.
Thank you, Councillor Mears. I think we've got Mr Ginman with us. I think it probably is best for Mr Ginman to answer this one for you.
Yeah, the housing complaints are complaints about the conditions of property rather than complaints about services. What we have at the moment is when they come into the contact centre and through to officers, they're just under general headings. Obviously, with issues like damp and mould or where there's rodent infestation and that kind of thing, we want to be able to break them down further. In raising this, I think we've identified that our current systems may be able to do that for us, and it's a project for coming months to work with ICT colleagues to see if we can configure what we have so that we can do the reporting better. It doesn't stop us doing our day-to-day jobs. What it means is difficult to give you the detail we'd like about the work that we're doing.
Thank you, Mr Ginman. Councillor Rowlands.
Thanks, Chairman. One of the figures that appears here is rather disturbing, showing a potential of about 900 existing. But obviously, looking at the increase, 147, it seems a very large increase for a relatively small borough. Obviously, the length of time that people are actually homeless is illustrated here as another worrying factor. We clearly, as it's stated, have a duty to do something actively about this. And of course, Lawrence Lodge isn't fully operative yet. So we seem to have got into something of a void as far as that's happening. That's my reading of the documentation. And a rather serious issue we're faced with, because it seems to be a problem that's somewhat escalating.
Can I just confirm, Councillor Rowlands, you're looking at page 25, 7.17. Is that the point that you're picking up? Yeah, thank you. So that's page 25, 7.17, yeah?
Thank you, Councillor Rowlands, for your question. We do have a challenge with temporary accommodation. We absolutely certainly do. I don't know if, Mr Ginman, you would like to comment in terms of the pattern and the increase that Councillor Rowlands refers to.
Yeah, I can advise Lawrence Lodge is full. There was an issue with repairs and maintenance there with Accent, which we've worked with them to resolve. So Lawrence Lodge is full. Connaught Court, which is our own scheme that we own ourselves for single homelessness, that's full as well. And the EAS, which is the Hope Hub short-term stop, is at times full, but it depends who we have that's suitable and qualifies to go into it at any given time. So in terms of Lawrence Lodge and the other accommodation available to us, we are making the most of that. At 7.17, with this is the number of people on the housing register, I will say that that is a pretty static number. We pretty much house out off the housing register every year the same number that apply. So in terms of those numbers, they're pretty static, but obviously it does mean that we have always got this need that we're not addressing because of the availability of mainly new social housing.
Thank you, Mr Ginman. Councillor Wheeler, then Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered if it's possible, a lot of mine are asking for extra information. I'm sorry I didn't get them to you ahead of time. And I'm happy for them to come back. We've obviously got an average and a mean number per application, so I'm on page 13, 2.7. So I can work out the mean expenditure. However, is it possible, please, to have the breakdown between amounts in the following categories? Below 500, 501 to 2,000, 200,000 and 2,001 to 5,000, and above 5,000, so that we can have some indication of the number of people that we are helping and whether they are large or small grants. I think that would be very helpful. Thank you. And then on page 15, I wonder if it's possible to have the numbers represented as an overall percentage, and also with a comparison of costs based on bed and breakfast versus other funded methods. So, for example, does Spelthorne buy more cheaply, as this is their established method stroke practice, versus a more mixed model in Guildford and a top-up model in Surrey Heath? I don't think that we're getting a full picture there. That's page 15, 3.6. I'm going to skip the next one because it's more or less been answered. And then on page 16, I wondered if we could be talked through the process for accessing the service. This is 3.12. And a cost per head of our rough sleepers, and how many people have actually been helped from sleeping on the streets under this funding. I've got others, but I'm skipping some of them out, Chair. So the other point actually relates to a point that was raised by a councillor earlier, and about our staff and the risk to our staff if Surrey County Council decide to take in the service that we are offering. And I just wondered whether or not there were any 2P considerations, i.e. if Surrey County Council would benefit from our staff and maybe keep having them kept and based locally. And also what considerations we are giving to training for the staff employed in these services to future-proof their employment with Surrey Heath Borough Council. So much as I appreciate we're communicating with them that it may all go to hell in a handcart, but what are we doing to actually prove to them that we value them and we would like to keep them? The other one is 5.2 on page 20. It's nice to see that we are planning community events, and obviously it's nice to know who went there from Surrey Heath Borough Council. I just wondered if we could have some indication, please, of how many of the community attended that event. go as far as page 33? Or is that the next one? I'd hate to peak too early, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler, for your very extensive, long list of requirements.
Report, actually.
What I will do, I will hand over to Clive in a moment for you to address the question about roof sleepers. And everything else, with the exception of the FSP team, I will come back to you in writing if that's okay, just because it's quite detailed and we'll need to go and do some work to pull those figures together for you. In terms of our staff and how we value them, we have an excellent team of senior officers here who are really nurturing that team and really supporting them. We're not at the point where we are about to have discussions about transferring staff. We're not at that stage yet. That would be something for a little bit further down the line. And I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, Mr. Stevens, when I say that we will give them every support through this. We can future-proof them, and we are doing that. But I wouldn't want to go into too much detail on that, but that is happening. And if you want a further detailed answer, I can provide it to you, unless you're prepared to take my assurances.
It would be nice to have a little bit more detail, if I may. Thank you.
That's fine.
Did you want Mr. Jimman? Mr. Jimman, are you happy to answer some of those questions?
Yeah, certainly the breakdown by DFGs and comparative costs for TA I can do, not off the top of my head, I'm afraid, but yeah, that's I have that information. With regard to the cost per head for rough sleepers on the different projects, it's not something we have done, but it's something I can do. And it rather than, it won't be a global figure, it have to be per project, because housing-led, for example, works with 4 individuals in a really intense way, whereas floating housing support, the caseload is about 20 individuals at any given time. So according to individuals' needs and the programme they're in, there'll be different costs, but I can certainly look at pulling something out on that.
Thank you, Mr. Jimman. Did you want to come back, Councillor Foyne-Cook?
Yes, please. I just remembered something that I think Councillor Wheeler might like to hear about. And I might ask Mrs. Kipping, if she's there, to speak about our Rising Stars scheme, which is centred around training for our employees. Thank you, Mrs. Kipping.
Yes, absolutely. So I just wanted to give Councillor Wheeler the assurance that we actively support our staff throughout the organisation, not just in a team that might be experiencing a bit of instability, but throughout the organisation, to consider broadening their knowledge and their experience across the council. And in fact, in the last couple of weeks, we've just launched a new programme called Rising Stars, which is aimed at staff across the council to broaden their experience in services that are outside their own. And so we are actively looking at ways to encourage staff to, as I say, broaden their experience outside their own specialism, to prepare them for, you know, any potential move that they might make, not just one caused by, you know, this particular situation. I do think it's very difficult to discuss the exact nature of the support we're giving teams in a public forum, where I'm very aware that that's the sort of thing that we should really be discussing internally with the teams themselves. But we are looking very much at supporting staff across the organisation to enable them to develop, with the focus on retaining them. And Councillor Wheeler will recall the people strategy that was published in October following Employment Committee last year. And one of the priorities in that is retention of staff. So we are looking at a number of initiatives to help retain our staff across the council. And I just wanted to draw the committee's attention to those initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe Mr. Roberts would like to say something.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Kipping. So the other two things just to draw to members' attention is that we're talking about a very high-performing team, arguably the highest performing family support team in the whole of the county area. And one of the greatest ways that you can support a member of staff and a team in terms of their concerns about job security is to make sure that they have really strong transferable skills and a really great track record. We don't want to lose them, but if the worst happens several months down the line, I think they're more able to access employment opportunities and good employment opportunities than maybe staff in family support teams elsewhere. The key thing, though, is that our staff are really loyal, very well managed, and the feedback we've had is they definitely do not want to leave. And so really, we have to plan for all eventualities because we're not in control of what Surrey County Council finally decide. But I think we're in a relatively strong position despite the difficult context that we find ourselves in. Thank you.
Thank you. I have got two others who want to put a hand up, but as they have already asked a question, I've got a few of my own. Actually, it's going back to family support and not on that point, but page 17, 5.2, I'm looking, and you say, very high-performing team. The figures were 406 in the last year, where previously there were 259. Without going into, obviously, specific cases, is there a specific area that's of concern why those numbers have gone up? So that's page 17, 5.2. So just concerned with those numbers going up quite a fair bit. On page 26, 7.2, I was on a webinar, scrutinising webinar only last week, and it was about complaints. And interestingly, one of the questions that came up the most from various quarters and the presenters was social housing complaints. And it's one, although we know we've had issues, we don't actually get feedback on what those complaints are, turnaround times, are they all mould, all those sort of things. So I'm wondering if there's any way, and I know it's not us, so it's obviously reliant on someone else, and there are obviously more than one housing provider as well. I'm wondering if there's any stats we can get, and maybe it wouldn't come to this, maybe it goes to external partnership, but just on specifically complaints, because I think that's an area where I think we agree there has been issues, and I know they're getting better, but it was interesting that was really a key point within that webinar. And then I think my last, and I don't want to bang on about the same thing I've banged on before, but I will. Page 27, point 8.13, it says we've had a successful campaign to promote volunteering. How do we actually know? I was at a careers fair at Collingwood today, speaking to a number of people that are in Surrey Heath that we deal with, are talking about volunteers, and they say they're struggling, and they have also been dealing with voluntary support North Surrey. So I've said it in this chamber a number of times, it's all well and good saying we've had a successful campaign. It's really easy to say that, but I still haven't had any proof or stats to say that is the case. So that's just a few things I've picked up on in this paper, and I don't necessarily expect you to give me answers on those straight away.
Thank you very much. I will, for your family support question, I'll ask Mr. Stevens to handle that. But before I do, let's talk about social housing complaints. It's something that we discuss on a regular basis, and you and I discuss it, myself and Mr. Stevens discuss it, myself and Accent discuss it. We discuss it all the time. It's one of these perpetual issues. What I will say is, Accent, as you know, there has been improvement. We know there's been improvement. Where we struggle is to get them to drill down into the statistics they give us. I would like you, to be able to see very specific statistics about Surrey Heath. Accent are aware that we're looking for this. They're trying to find a way to deliver that to us. We think it should be deliverable, and it is just getting them to do it. Now, in a recent meeting with Accent, I meet with them monthly and sometimes more than monthly, we spoke about the possibility of them quite soon being invited back to external partnerships. And I've encouraged them to try and get to the point where they can provide those statistics to us, because otherwise external partnerships may be very challenging for them. There is an absolute willingness, I will say that from Accent, to work positively with us, to give us what we need. And I hope that when we get to that point, when they are back, we will be able to do that. But just be assured that it is very much a running theme on our monthly meetings, and we are progressing, but we're just not quite there yet.
And it's actually fair to say I don't want to just pick on Accent. I mean, we have other housing providers as well, and I don't know what the stats are like with those. I get less complaints personally, but it doesn't mean there aren't any. Thank you.
The vast majority of our housing is with Accent. And that's why. And it may be that we, when we send over our inquiries, that we should get even if we got resolved, it would be a weight off our minds to know that those residents are taken care of. So I will certainly feed that back as well. Thank you. Mr. Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Finan-Cook. Just to pick up on the same point, if I can say with confidence that every single meeting that Councillor Finan-Cook has with Accent, we are repeatedly requesting the stats for the borough, and borough-specific stats is what we really want to see. And I know that Councillor Lee is fully cognisant of the software that they use for reporting and recording their stats. So this is something that could be delivered, and we've had a commitment that they'll look at it. In relation to the family support numbers and the number of families that they support, there's an increase for three key reasons. One being that we are seeing an increase in demand generally. The second being that the services above us, the statutory services, where they are struggling with that demand, are referring cases down. In some instances, perhaps from the perception of officers where they shouldn't. And also in relation to our family centres, there are referrals coming up from there as well. So those are the three key reasons why we're seeing an increase.
Thank you. Okay, so I've got Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Mears, and unless anyone's got a burning, and then Councillor Noble, and now I'll call it a line after that so we can move on to the next item. So Councillor Mears first. Sorry, Councillor Wilson first.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions and I'll just ask them both if that's okay. First one is about page 23, paragraph 6.2 on the Household Support Fund. So Surrey is a more affluent place than many other places, but there is some genuine deprivation here, and it's getting worse as the economy enters recession. And I see it every day in my ward, people struggling with the cost of living crisis because the price of essentials is going up faster than people's wages and benefits. And we've seen the increase in demand, as Mr. Stevens just said, for a lot of the council services. Page 13's got a chart of the homelessness increase in demand that Councillor Rowlands mentioned earlier, and in fact our CFO told the Parliamentary Select Committee about this, rocketing amounts of homelessness as well. So unfortunately in the budget today the Chancellor only extended the Household Support Fund for another 6 months, and it really needs to be for another 2 years, so it's creating more uncertainty. So if the Household Support Fund really does end in 6 months, what effect will that have on the poorest people in our borough? And the second question, if I may, on inclusion, the recent Islamophobic statements by Conservative MPs have been in the headlines, and can you reassure the Muslim community in Surrey Heath that we find this sort of discrimination and prejudice totally unacceptable, and that we wish everyone a happy and blessed Ramadan? Thank you.
Before I pass on to you, having been in your situation when the Housing Support Fund scheme came in, and actually was here when it came in, I've had that thought every 6 months for the last 2 years. So whilst I totally agree, I totally actually agree with you, and I don't agree with you on a lot, but I would agree with you on this, it needs to be extended. I've also been in a situation that every it is continually extended, so I would hope that means it will be. There's no guarantee, but I totally agree that it should be extended. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. In Surrey Heath, there are significant areas of deprivation. We have a few pockets. And we know from feedback from our partners like Citizens Advice that they are seeing ongoing increased levels of need. We know that, and we can't dispute that. I was glad to see HSP extended, and have been aware, as Councillor Garrett has outlined, of these continual extensions. I certainly hope that it continues again, because if it doesn't, it will end just before winter kicks in, which is a horrific time of year for anybody who is suffering in the cost of living crisis. So that is a real worry. The loss of HSP would likely mean that more households would struggle, obviously, particularly when it comes to energy debt and food poverty. Citizens' advice tell us frequently that they're seeing more households in a negative budget, even after their debt advisors and their financial advisors sit down with people. They go through everything so carefully, and even after people implement every piece of advice they're being given, they're still not getting to a positive figure at the end of all the sums, and that is extremely worrying. And I think that hasn't been seen. You know, mostly those advisors have been able to get those people to a better financial position. And although things improve, it's never quite getting them to that. In a lot of cases, in some cases, it's never quite getting them there. As a council, we have very close working relationships with our partner organisations, and that is in no small part down to the work that our officers do. We provide revenue grants to organisations that help those who are most in need within the borough, for example, the Hope Hub and Citizens Advice, and we'll continue to work with organisations to share the data, to monitor the patterns, so that we can actually have a really good idea of how things are in our borough. The provision of our grant funding from the lottery, the community fund, the emergency food and fuel, that they will continue to support those organisations, and we've really focused hard on trying to channel our resources to organisations that are working with people who are in particularly vulnerable positions. So let's hope that Councillor Garrett is right, and hopefully he'll be making noises in the right directions to ensure that that it continues beyond next winter. Thank you. Oh, and your second question, my apologies. These questions like this always make me feel a little bit uneasy, but this one is a really simple one to answer, and thank you for asking it. I want to make it really, really clear, and I've delivered this message a couple of times when similar questions have been asked, that this administration champions equity and inclusion. And when I say equity, I mean true inclusion for all our minority groups, including our Muslim community. Our Achieve an Equity strategy, which I speak about frequently, is excellent, and our continued partnerships with organisations across the borough is good evidence of our commitment to making sure that we are on track to increase equity across the borough for people. Surrey Heath is, to my mind, extremely proud to be home to the mosque and the Islamic Centre. And I'm looking around the chamber, and I know that there's plenty of people here, including myself, who were in attendance at the mosque open day last year. And I have very fond memories of being so warmly welcomed and learning so much about Islam. I thought I knew a fair bit, and I learned a hell of a lot more that day. And Islam is rooted in love and a driving need to do good for other people. And I think we can all learn a lot from that. Our Muslim community is integral to Surrey Heath. And yes, I would like to reassure our Muslim friends and neighbours that within this administration, we don't tolerate any kind of Islamophobia. It's not acceptable, and it won't be tolerated here. And just my final word would be to echo your sentiments, to wish our Muslim friends and neighbours a very peaceful and blessed Ramadan. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I'm conscious of time, so Councillor Mears, hopefully a short question, and Councillor Noble, and then we'll call that one a day on this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Page 25, 7.17, we've got a need 14 household requiring 4-bedroom homes, but last year we weren't able to house any in 4-bedroom homes. Is there anything we can do about that? I appreciate a lot of the responsibility lies with our providers and what social housing is available. Interested in that. And secondly, I echo Councillor Garrett's comments about the number of complaints we receive about social housing in our ward has decreased. But equally, I speak to lots of people on the door, and there's a general, they can't be bothered anymore to report because in the past, nothing's been done, no action has been taken by the Social Housing Association. And, you know, it's not just one we're talking about, there are multiple that operate in Old Dean in particular, and I do get complaints about all three. So is that a concern of yours that, you know, we see complaints going down in numbers, but people are still frustrated? And is there anything we can do perhaps in-house to engage with some of those residents to understand the need without relying on the data that we do get from our housing associations, no matter whether it's Accent or not?
Thank you very much, Councillor Mears. The first question, I'll go to refer to Mr Ginman in a moment. He'll be able to give you a fuller answer on that than I can. In terms of residents reporting issues, as you know, where I live, we've got a concentration of social housing, not dissimilar to your ward. We're very, very similar in lots of ways. I think our experiences are slightly different. So I do have lots of residents who are very happy to report. They don't always get the outcome that they want. And I'm not going to sit here and suggest that they don't have challenges in terms of getting their repairs booked in, right? And those repairs happening. I'm not going to suggest that. I think we all have a bit of a responsibility here because we need to be sure that we are positively engaging with our residents with regard to Accent and assuring them that actually there's been a huge change in Accent in terms of the people who are involved, in terms of the systems that are employed, and that it is absolutely worth their while reporting. And we need to encourage them to do that. I will speak to officers about whether we can undertake some kind of work to engage with residents to try and get a different picture. If you know, we can see if that would be a possible thing. We have also asked Accent to ensure that every resident has contact in terms of making sure they know how to best report things. I think sometimes people automatically try to use the phone and I know not everybody can report via the internet, so I'm not suggesting that that's the only way that they should do it, but there are a variety of ways of making contact. So it is, again, another running theme in our monthly meetings with Accent, as Mr Stevens will attest to. But I think we all need to just encourage residents as positively as possible to engage, because the willingness is there with Accent. We just need to make sure that we're reporting it. I hope that answers your question. Okay, thank you.
Are we going to go to Mr Ginman?
Yeah, with regard 4-bedroom homes, obviously we're reliant on two things. One is existing homes becoming available in the stock because people move on from them, and new build. And obviously, even when we do have a new build 4-bedroom property, a family moves in, they're likely to be a family that also has young children, and they're going to be there a considerable amount of time. So actually what there is there's not like much movement within the stock that we have. I will say of the households that went into 3-bedroom homes, some of those would have what we call a 4-bedroom need, but we've allocated them a larger 3-bedroom property, perhaps with separate reception rooms downstairs, in order to meet that need. So there is some movement from that 4-bedroom list, but yes, there is an unmet need for 4-bedroom homes in the social housing stock. It is small, but obviously because we're not getting them, it is that consistent need that we're seeing.
Thank you. And Councillor Noble, you get the benefit of being the last person with a question.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll be brief. Thank you firstly for your presentation and your work and the office's work over the last 10 months. And my question follows on from Councillor Wheeler's query and builds on Councillor Wilson's. On paragraph 5.20, Hong Kong, British National Overseas, and my fellow ward councillor, Councillor Yung Parrott's suggestion that Hong Kong BNOs need support and advice. Is there any plan to continue that support and advice going forward with maybe further events, or what forms the support and advice taking going forward, please?
Thank you, Councillor Noble. That event with the Hong Kong BNOs, I was in attendance at that event, and it was absolutely fantastic. We had such a range of partner organisations there providing really good support. A lot of effort went into it, and it was an excellent event. I think we're very driven by the need, so if that's requested and there are people within our borough that would like a repeat of that event, or a further development of that event to be offered, then absolutely we're open to that.
Thank you. And I'm going to, one last point, not a question, you don't worry. I know there'll be plenty of other opportunities, but I'd like to thank personally Tony Wakeford for all his 30 years, am I right? 30 years working in Surrey Heath in his housing. I certainly used him a lot when I was in, I'm sure you have as well. He will be surely missed, and obviously I know you're looking for a replacement, and good luck with that. Okay, so next item, and you are more than welcome to leave unless you want to stay and listen to Councillor Rice's portfolio. Item 6, portfolio update on net zero wellbeing and environment.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for inviting me to tonight's meeting. Like Councillor Fine and Cook, it's been a very busy 10 months, and as you can see from the report, the portfolio covers a large array of disciplines across multiple services. I don't intend to cover all of those in detail, but to provide a brief overview. The corporate enforcement team has had a very busy 12 months. As you can see in the table in 4.2, the work demands have increased in all areas of the service except one. These increases are due to the increases in complaints to our officers, but also due to improvements in our internal reporting systems. In relation to fly tipping, whilst incidents have increased by 23%, the number of investigations has reduced due to a reduction in the evidence being found in the tip material, or due to the lack of witnesses to the offence itself. Our deployable CCTV will be utilised wherever possible, and we will not hesitate to take action against offenders. We're also seeing significant increases in antisocial behaviour, and unauthorised encampments in the borough increased by 80% compared to last year. So in 2022 there were 6, and in 2023 there were 11. As part of our forward look, I will shortly be setting out proposed revisions to the fixed penalty notices within Surrey Heath to deter fly tipping and other environmental offences. As you can also see from the report, the corporate enforcement team work collaboratively with other agencies to deliver results, whether it be the police, Accent, or organisations such as Keep Britain Tidy. Under health and wellbeing, we're fortunate to have received funding for a health integration development officer who is working on the creation of our whole systems approach to healthy weight strategy. To encourage active communities, our community engagement team administer wellbeing walks, finding your feet, walking football and walking cricket to encourage physical activity with great success, and we're looking to expand these through funding from the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. Officers also brought forward the hugely popular Surrey Heath Sports Awards. Continuing on from health and wellbeing under an inclusion, our community engagement team ensure that physical activity is accessible to all through working with partners to deliver inclusive activities such as women-only swimming sessions in our award-winning Places Leisure Centre. They also have launched the Join In scheme to make access to sport more accessible for those where money is a barrier. Officers were instrumental in bringing forward a new provider for Club Dean, which reopened last September. In environmental health and licensing, the performance of the service continues to be strong. It's in my opinion, one of the best performing parts of the council. The service regulates over 700 food businesses and 1,400 businesses for health and safety. It also responded to over 650 service requests last year, ranging from noisy neighbours to unsafe food, and let's not forget the Camberley stink from Thames Water. The teams are also innovative and forward-thinking in their work, piloting healthy eating initiatives in conjunction with county councils such as Eat Out to Eat Well, to provide healthier menu choices to customers. In terms of air quality, and I know we've got the air quality report later on in the agenda, the team monitor the quality of our air over 51 different locations and issue permits for pollutant emissions in 22 businesses, making sure the air quality in Surrey Heath is as clean as possible. The recent introduction of our portable air quality monitor means we are able to assess air quality outside of our fixed monitoring locations, adding a further additional layer of monitoring. The refuse and street care contract with Amy is delivered on behalf of the 4 partner authorities within Joint Waste Solutions, and we're joined tonight by the Partnership Director and Head of Operations from Joint Waste Solutions, for which Surrey Heath is the host authority. This role accounts for around 50% of JWS's activities, as JWS also delivers the work of the Surrey Environment Partnership on behalf of all 11 districts and boroughs in the County Council. Thanks to JWS and the fantastic recycling efforts of our residents, we are ranked top in Surrey and 8th in the country for recycling, with a recycling rate of 59.3% in the latest figures released by DEFRA for 22-23, and that's something I'm very keen to improve. I'm not happy being 8th. We're also only one of the handful of local authorities nationally with a 5-year average recycling rate of over 60%. JWS are working to ensure our performance continues to improve. We have done a great deal of work towards achieving our net zero objectives, which are set out in 3.1 and 3.2, but there is much more to do. Our climate change manager is working to speed up delivery of actions to reduce our carbon output in accordance with accelerating the climate action plan, and many of the actions required to take us to net zero by 30 require further offers of resource to develop and capital deliver. So we're working to come forward with the most effective but also cost-effective options. For example, the recent passing of the solar panels for places leisure. And last but not least, emergency planning. Something that's probably been on a lot of minds recently with the very bad weather. And despite a relatively small number of emergencies, which is set out in 5.2, it's reassuring to know that we have a team in place with detailed response plans and trained officers ready to respond to civil emergencies. Ultimately hoping for the best, but planning for the worst. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Rise. Let's see how long it is before we talk about dog poopings. Councillor Wheeler, you are first.
Sorry, Chair, did you want to come in before I start?
No, it's fine, you can carry on.
Okay. So thank you very much. Thank you for the report. I just wondered if we could have an update, please. I know that we've referred, and in the update of the spreadsheet, we've got the fact that there were some delays with the car parks. I just wondered if you could share with us, not now, but a rollout for all of the car parks that are identified to have EVs. On page 33, it's reporting that there's been an uplift in the number of unauthorised encampments being recorded. I just wondered if we've changed the way in which we are recording encampments, purely and simply from my perception, certainly within my ward, we've actually had less recently. It may be that they're all choosing to be somewhere else. But I just wanted to know if that's separate events or number of families, etc. And then on, sorry, I'm going to have to, I haven't put it's not got the page. I just wondered what the breakdown is. Sorry, it's 4.2. What the breakdown is of planning enforcement referrals between those that are valid and those that are invalid requests for enforcement. There's a spelling mistake on page 36, but it's not a major one. And then on page 37, the emergency planning and business continuity, I'm really surprised to read through that there is nothing there around flooding. Now, I'm lucky enough to sit on various flood resilience or a flood resilience group within one of the parishes that I support, but we don't seem to have a focus on that. Given at the moment, certainly in one of my wards, it's almost impossible to navigate around it because roads are closed as a result of flooding. I'm surprised that we don't have anything on that. And also, with the amount of sewage that Thames Water is still pumping into our rivers, there was another pump out today, I believe, I'm surprised that that isn't higher up our agenda, because it's not just the inconvenience of flooding and the impact that has on householders, but there is also, I think, more and more an actual wider public health impact. I've got others, but I'll let somebody else come in case we run out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. I'll try and take them in order. So car parks, my understanding is that only 2 of the 46 charging points have been connected so far. However, this is due to be the challenges around the network operator connecting the chargers to the grid. So the work that we've done in the council was done on time, but it was then the contractor. Not trying to use that as an excuse, but we are hopeful that all the electrical works will be completed in March. However, we are waiting for confirmed dates for Chobham and for Watchits. So you have a confirmed. Well, that's very good news. In terms of, I think that answered that question. In terms of increasing encampments, unauthorised encampments, last year was particularly high. In my ward, I had 5 within the space of 4 weeks. I can speak to the corporate enforcement team if there's been an analysis of why that increase was, and Mr. Stevens actually can come in on that one. I'll go to him just a moment. Actually, I'm going to go over to Mr. Stevens now, so I can then have a look at the other point. Mr. Stevens, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Rice. I'll pick up on a few of those points if I can. So in relation to the unauthorised encampments, there isn't a change in the way they were actually recording those. I think it's just a change in the location that perhaps you're seeing, as Councillor Rice said. He's had a number within his ward. We're aware of some within Frimley as well. So I think it's just the fact that they're shuffling around to where there is accessible spaces. In terms of the enforcement complaints on valid versus invalid, yes, I'll have a conversation with Mrs. Lewis and get you a breakdown on those. I just wanted to pick up on the flooding if I could. We aren't lead flood authority, especially for surface water flooding or highway flooding. That comes down to the county council, but there are rigorous plans in place. Behind the scenes, there is a huge amount of dialogue that happens between ourselves as an officer group, Applied Resilience, who work on our behalf, and the county and other agencies, just to make sure there's proper dialogue and oversight and understanding of what's going on. That doesn't necessarily translate to what you might see or what the public see, but it does happen behind the scenes. In terms of sewage within rivers, that is slightly outside of my remit, I have to admit, so it might very well be that we'll ask Mr. Purden to respond on behalf. Councillor Rice.
I don't think Wayne is on the call. If he is, I will pass over to him. But I do also want to assure Councillor Wheeler that flooding and sewage is very high on my agenda. Councillor Stevens will know my emails to him and the team are almost daily, especially with regards to the discharges into the River Bourne. Recently, I think and I know that it's not necessarily just the discharges into the river, but that sewage is then, I do agree with you, it's becoming a potential health and environmental problem. As Mrs. Stevens said, unfortunately, we aren't the lead authority on flooding, so we can only apply pressure where we can, but it is definitely on my agenda, and as part of the my annual plan work for this year is carrying out environmental audits across the borough, and my intention is to start actually in your ward, Councillor Wheeler. So it will be discussions with ward members, with the parish councils, to understand how myself as a portfolio holder and as what Surrey Heath can do to advocate for those communities to ensure that the Environment Agency, Surrey County Council are all paying attention to those concerns. I don't think Mr. Purden's on the call. So I'll pass over those points to Mr. Purden to get back to you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Wilson, then Councillor Hode, then Councillor Rowlands.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. And could you pass on my thanks to the JWS workers who recently very swiftly and very effectively cleared up all the litter on the side of the A30 in my ward, and it's made a massive difference to the appearance. Question is on page 46 and 9.14. it's great news about the new litter bins, and we all got an email today about consulting from the officers consulting us on the litter bin replacement programmes in our wards. So thank you for that. In my ward, I'm part of my ward is part of Windlesham Parish Council. On the list of litter bins and dog poo bins, there's a lot of them are owned by the parish council, and they're not scheduled to be replaced, and they could really do with being replaced. Our parish council is going to be invited to get their bins replaced as part of this programme as well.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to agree with you with regards to JWS. They're an excellent team who do a really good job, not only with just managing the contract that we have, but generally responding to residents' concerns with regards to waste and litter. With regards to the bin replacement programme, there will be contact with the parish councils, inviting them to join with the scheme. There will, if the parish councils wish to come into the scheme, there will be the financial requirement on them to provide the funding for the bins that they wish to replace. It's not an automatic programme for the parishes. The money that we've put aside for the bin replacement programme is for the bins that we own and manage. But yes, the parish councils are definitely going to be invited to join if they wish to. I would recommend that they not just be invited, but they're highly encouraged to join. And Mr. Stevens does want to come in, but it's also just not just the parish, but other external organisations such as the Wildlife Trust that also have bins. We're reaching out to all of them. And Mr. Stevens, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Rice. I didn't want to interject then. I wanted to direct the question towards Sue McCubbin, our Recreation and Leisure Services Manager, who I know is chomping at the bit to respond in relation to this.
Good evening. I just wanted to make everyone aware we have contacted the parishes who are keen to understand what the costs will be. So at the moment, we're just going through a process. In fact, the prices have just literally come back this week of analysing that, so we can appoint the contractor who's going to provide the bins. We can then let the parishes know how much the bins are going to cost. There is interest from the parishes, but I haven't got any confirmation yet. But we are keen to work with them, along with Accent, if they want to be involved. Thank you.
Do I assume there will be like a bulk buying discount if they buy them at the same time?
Correct.
Yes. I was just to add on to that, the benefit of them coming into the scheme is that they would benefit from our procurement process and our purchasing power. So it's the more bins we can buy, the cheaper eventually it will become.
Okay, Councillor Hode next.
Thank you, Chair. Just one, and hopefully a very simple question. Page 43 in the licensing section, point 8.2, it talks about weekly meetings and town centre and village pub watch meetings. I wasn't familiar with those. Are those communicated? Are those things that councillors can attend? Can we get any more information on those, please? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. The pub watch meetings are carried out between licensing officers and the licensed premises managers generally. It's not something that councillors normally go to. However, I don't see why you're not banned from them, and I can liaise with officers to see if there's a possibility of councillors being invited. It generally is. It's meetings between officers, with the police, with the licence premises, to discuss issues such as antisocial behaviour, any potential banned persons. So it's ensuring that the premises have access to a wide information net and intelligence net, rather than each pub having to act on their own. That's but I'll speak with officers to see if there's a potential for councillors to come along.
Thank you. That we appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Rowlands.
Thank you, Chair. Page 34, 4.8, Victoria Court. It's a long been an eyesore and a difficult operation. Congratulations to the officers finally working it through. But it actually is part of a larger area in that spot. I don't know, is there any thinking about what's going to happen now as far as the area around Victoria Court is concerned? The other point I'd like to talk about is the depot in Doman Road. We're liaising with Surrey County Council on that, do I read that, as with the space there that we looked at for a possible children's playgroup, are Surrey being helpful on this issue and being progressive as far as the future of the depot is concerned?
Thank you, Chair. With regards to Victoria Court, obviously we're very pleased that's been going forward. I will actually pass over to Mr Stevens on this because it's more of a technical side. Just with regards to Doman Road, I'm actually going to pass over to Mr Stevens for that one as well. Personally, it's not that, in my opinion, it's not that Surrey County Council is anti it, it's just that sometimes Surrey County Council can be, in its nature, difficult. But I'm going to pass, that's a personal opinion, I'm just going to pass over to Mr Stevens on both those questions.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Thank you, Chair. So, in relation to the first question, we did email you, Councillor Rowlands, a couple of days ago, just to highlight that if you had any particular concerns about other buildings that would be considered as an untidy site, so we could utilise our planning powers and the Section 215 notices that we can serve to flag them, and then our officers in corporate enforcement would assess them and see whether or not there was any action that we could take, whether that be informal, so speaking to the landowners to encourage them to bring those sites up to a serviceable standard, or actually taking enforcement action. We would make a judgment based on each site and its merits. In relation to Doman Road, yes, we are having conversations about the future of the depot and whether or not we can work in partnership with the County Council to provide a larger strategic depot, something that's called a MRF. Those conversations have been ongoing for quite some time, but we hope to have a good understanding about whether or not that's feasible within the next few months. The conversations around the play space outside of Doman Road Depot, but in the St Michael's ward, have stalled for two reasons, as you're aware. One is around land ownership and the complexities there, and also the location being close to the highway and the safety implications of having a play space directly next to a road. So we will continue to try and have those conversations, but clearly we can't guarantee a positive outcome there.
Thank you. Councillor Mears and then...
Thank you very much. 7.11, are we able to get a number of young people who have been supported by the join-in scheme? And my second question relates to 6.5, about us having a corporate success target for the number of establishments being rated 3 or above for food hygiene. Is that a target that we should have for corporate success, considering that, you know, food hygiene standards are down to those establishments, and if we are rating honestly establishments less than a 3, that's a good thing. I wouldn't want there to ever feel like a need that we needed to rate establishments as a 3 or above to meet a target, as targets are there to be met.
Can I just, because I've got the figures for the joint scheme, and I've got a question off the back of that, so if you're happy for me to ask that question as well. Okay, because I asked a question on this, because I was a little bit, and it also feeds into the Specsavers Youth Games, which we're not doing as a borough anymore. So I've got a question related to that, because I believe that the take-up's 24, and 4 of those are on the Old Dean. So if I look at specifically the Old Dean, because obviously it's the only one I can actually get some stats on, there are, within the primary schools, there are 126 pupil premium. Okay, I'm not looking at Collingwood. I don't know what the figures are specifically for the Old Dean there, but for that, so there's 126. Only 4 have taken up this joint scheme. So is it something that's being offered to all the primary schools throughout the borough? That's my first question. And if this is replacing, which is what my assumption is, the youth games, what are the figures for the youth games? Is it comparable? So if it's comparable, then the fact we're not doing them, we're not necessarily losing out. But if it's not comparable and there was a lot more take-up in the youth games, do we need to be doing something differently? So it's just off the back of that question. Thank you.
Thank you. So the join-in scheme and it crosses both mine and Councillor Finan Cook's portfolio. So in our opinion, the joining scheme is a better one because it runs throughout the year rather than just one potential one. Obviously, with a new scheme, you're always going to find that take-up is slow to start off with. And I would hope that as the year goes on and as years continue to go on, there will be more. With regards to access to, I'll pass over to Councillor Van der Cook with regards to the schools, but it's the reason why we had to end our involvement with the youth games was essentially a very difficult decision to ensure that we were able to find efficiency savings within the budget. It was a difficult decision to make, and the scheme that kind of has replaced it continues to provide access and accessibility into sport provision, especially because it's a year-long round. It's aimed at providing the access into clubs directly rather than just one day or one event. And we'll actually pass over to Councillor Van der Cook on this.
Thank you. I'm glad I stayed now. So just in terms of applications, there's been 39 applications received. 11 are still going through assessment, and 4 were declined because they were out of area. So that is unfortunate. So there are 24 young people currently active, which is great because this scheme has only been open since January. So in that short period of time, we've got 24 young people into regular sport, which is a brilliant achievement. Last year, I'm just looking at the figures for the youth games, 64 young people from the borough participated for that one day. So, I mean, my feeling is that engaging young people in regular sport and activity across the whole year is going to be extremely valuable for them. And I would hope that as the year progresses, we'll have more young people enrolling. And I would hope that we would certainly be near that number of 64, and so that it would be comparable, but engagement over a much more significant period of time, which can only be a good thing.
Can I just come off the back of that, which is good? I thought it started in November, so it started in January. That's even better. What I do know, when I was speaking to Craig when he was here previously, specifically about the Old Dean again, but the residents don't like leaving the Old Dean. So if there isn't an event that's not being run on the Old Dean, which there are facilities to do so, then the uptake will be a lot lower. So is there a plan if that's the case? And if the figures follow as they are, brilliant. But if there is that dip, is there anything we can do? I think Camberley Judo Club is on this list, if memory serves me correctly, which is obviously on the Old Dean. So, and I'm obviously accessibility within the pockets that you alluded to earlier on. If it's not in Watchits, for instance, will the people in Watchits travel elsewhere? So that's my question on that, really.
Thank you. It's tricky, isn't it? Because it's about accessibility and affordability of travel, really. There are other ways and means of supporting young people into sport surrounding the join-in schemes. So there are other ways to be able to encourage young people to access it. And I think we probably have some messaging to do around that. For the moment, I think we'll continue to have the contact that we're having. We are always reaching out to new sports clubs as we come across them. We are trying to build up that list so that there are more options available to young people across the whole borough, so that that accessibility is improved. But I take your point, and it's something that I think I'll go back and have a chat with officers about.
You know, I hijacked your first question. There was a second question, wasn't there? Food hygiene. Who wants to take that one?
Me, please. So just going back to the question, it was regards to whether it's a correct target to have. Is that?
It's whether the target should exist, really, for us to have a target of how many establishments we should rate as a 3 and above.
I do think that it is a target that we should have, because the 3 and above is a widely used industry requirement. For example, for websites like Just Eat and Deliveroo, there will be restrictions on an organisation that are 2 and below. So it's important for us as an organisation to have a high target of achieving those. We have a very good success rate because we're very lucky that within Surrey Heath we have generally very good food service industries. But but no, I don't see why we wouldn't have it. I think it's important that we are holding ourselves to account to make sure that we are driving it forward. And I do think Mr. Stevens wants to come in.
Well, Mr. Roberts and Mr. Stevens are arguing over who wants to answer. So
But
Mr.
yes,
Stevens
I'll pass over to Mr. Stevens first.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Rice. Mr. Roberts, you sure you didn't want to come in first? So Councillor Rice is completely right, Councillor Mears. There are a number of reasons why our food businesses want to be 3 or above. Largely it's around clearly reputation more than anything else. We are overseen and governed by the Food Standards Agency. The Food Standards Agency require us to undertake inspections of eligible businesses. So that is anyone who is effectively offering food for sale. Now, there is an inspection frequency in relation to all food premises. Typically, a standard restaurant or takeaway is inspected every 18 months, and we provide a score on the basis of that inspection. And that's what dictates their food hygiene rating scheme rating. 3 is classed as broadly compliant. Anything beneath that, there's an expectation we would take enforcement action. 3 or above, that demonstrates that they are a business where it is safe to eat on the basis of that last inspection.
Mr. Roberts.
I was just going to add on to the point. I think where the questions come, I understand why the question's been asked. So the target is the inspection rate. How from the moment a food industry is open, a few food premises opened, there is a 28-day target to have that inspection carried out, and we are meeting that. The 97.5% is an outcome of that inspection routine. So it's not that we say we need to have 97.5% 3 and above. It's that 97.5% of the inspections that we carry out within the 28 days are 3 and above. Mr. Roberts.
Thank you. It's very hard to come after two experts on the subject, but just to add another dimension as well. So, of course, the council's professional environmental health officers, they have a role around enforcement when things go terribly wrong, and they're very good at that job. They have a role around inspection in terms of making sure standards are adhered to, and they do that, I think, very effectively. I think part of the question is, does the target undermine the council's ability to undertake a robust assessment? Because we are focused on achieving that target. Now, I don't think it does. But the reason I think the target is important is that the Environmental Health Service also have a role in proactively supporting those businesses to achieve higher standards. We're not there just to catch them out. We're not there to see them fail. We're there to see them succeed. And therefore, if we deem a restaurant to be high risk, those inspection rates will go up, the level of support through those interventions will go up, and as a result, we expect to see improvements in their food hygiene. And so it is a positive thing that we have an expectation that they're in the top category rather than languishing in the bottom categories. Thank you.
That got a lot of discussion, didn't it? Councillor Wilson, I have next.
Thank you, Chair. Just a short one this time. Page 34 and paragraph 4.9. It's not just the licensing enforcement that are an impressive team. The planning enforcement team always impress me when I see them. But this one is about some failed enforcement action, and very laudably also honestly admits that the enforcement action should not have been attempted. So I was just wondering, why was this enforcement action attempted? Was there, try and put it delicately, was there any member involvement in the influence the decision to go ahead with it? Thank you.
Who wants to take that one?
I'm going to ask Mr. Stevens to answer that one. I don't know the answer to it effectively, essentially.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Rice. Councillor Wilson, if I may, I'll provide you with a very extensive and detailed answer to this. Mrs. Lewis, who is the enforcement team leader, will answer this far more admirably than I can. So I think it's more prudent that I allow her to respond in writing.
Of course, thank you.
Thank you. I've actually got a few questions, and I know I'm running over time, but I did give Councillor Finan-Cook a bit longer because we ran out of question time. So I've got a few other questions, and I promised I'd be short. I've lost it. Oh yeah, so first one, page 44, it's the graph reference the recycling rates and the 9.5, the very last figure. 20, I know it's 20,041 to 42, which is a long way off, but there's a massive drop. So I'm assuming we've got plans in place to reduce, because we're already quite good at recycling in Surrey Heath. So to drop to 157 sounds like a massive drop. So I'd be interested to hear about that. And the only other one I've got is relating to page 36, 4.15. A report setting out proposed revisions to fixed penalty notices policy will be put to the executive, setting out the options and recommended approach. We've already said higher up in this paper that we struggle with enforcement. So what is the logic of spending more time putting together more work for bringing in increasing penalties when we aren't already bringing in the penalty? Now, I know it comes down to people reporting it, and I get that's one side of the coin. So, but I just like to understand the logic of putting more time and effort into something we're already not getting much from. Thank you.
Thank you. On the first question, I will hand over to Kelly Goldsmith, who's the Partnership Director of JWS. I am just going to answer your second question first, and because I think Kelly's answer will be a bit more in-depth. In terms of the fixed penalty notices, there was government changes which allowed the increases to happen. So we reviewed them in that sense. Personally, I think when it comes to environmental offences, they are crimes, and we should pursue them wherever possible. However, these fixed penalty notices also act as a deterrent. And when I bring the paper to executive, setting them out, and I'll make that further clear, but there's that two-pronged approach of increasing the fixed penalty notices as enabled by government to ensure that it fits the crime correctly, but also a sufficient deterrent to hopefully deter would-be fly tippers and other offenders. And I will pass over to Ms. Goldsmith.
Thank you. And just Joe, isn't it? Before you speak, thank you for your detailed response to my garden waste question, which I asked reference to paper because there was no figures, and it was good to see that they've actually been on the increase.
So it's Kelly Goldsmith who's...
Kelly,
so you got an answer from Joe, who's Head of Operations, and Kelly is our Partnership Director.
Over to you.
Thank you both. So essentially the target that's in there for 2041-42 is a relatively new target that was published in 2023, where they're looking for everybody to halve the amount of residual waste that they manage within the area based on the 2019 data, so pre-COVID effectively. There's also a lot of emerging policy around the waste agenda at the moment, with things like extended producer responsibility, the deposit return scheme, and simpler recycling. So we're trying to get further clarity on what those policies look like and what they mean for us. And then we'll be developing a detailed strategy to look at how we can deliver those targets over the coming years. What we are doing in the interim, and I know Councillor Rice's point that he's not happy being eighth, and we're not happy with you being eighth. We would prefer you to be higher up. You're 2.3% at the moment off of the number one spot. So we will look to see, what we can do, and we continue to look. So we're in discussion about any initiatives and projects that we could potentially trial as to how we can reduce the amount of residual waste that is in the stream, because obviously reducing the residual waste also has an impact positively on the recycling rate.
Thank you. Right, have I got any other questions? Councillor Mears.
Super quick, off the back of food hygiene. If for some reason we had a few tricky businesses or establishments which meant we couldn't reach our corporate success target of 95%, what would we do to get back on track?
As an operational question, operational answer, I'm going to have to ask Mr. Stevens to answer that question.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Mears. So the 98%, as Councillor Rice said, is the inspections that are undertaken within 28 days of the due date. So whether that's a new premises that's just registered or one that's part of the inspection cycle already. We don't just ignore the 2% or the 5% or whatever percentage we don't achieve within the 28 days. They are picked up as part of our inspection programme. So ultimately, if a premises is inspected 29 days after the due date, clearly that affects our statistics, but it doesn't mean it drops off the list. We do report annually to the Food Standards Agency as well, so they are fully aware of our performance figures.
Sorry, perhaps I didn't ask it quite right. I'm talking about the 95% of establishments we want to rate a 3 and above. If for some reason some establishments just can't bring themselves up to spec, what can we do to get them back in that?
Apologies for completely missing the question, Councillor Mears. As Mr. Roberts said, we don't just go in a heavy-handed way to enforce. We support businesses, and we do it in quite a substantial way. It's my previous profession, and the enforcement element of the role is a very small percentage. The rest is around supporting those businesses to drive up compliance, because we know that strong compliance and good hygiene actually is good for business. We signpost to a huge amount of other organisations, whether that's independent trainers, support websites, the Food Standards Agency website, and other entities to make sure those businesses perform the best they possibly can. So the short answer, Councillor Mears, is we do everything we can to support those businesses.
Come back on that one as well. I've been out on a number of visits with the environmental health team on their inspections, and the team are incredibly professional, but they also build the personal and professional relationships with the premises as well. So it's providing the expertise and support. So it's ensuring, and as mentioned earlier, if they fall below the 3 or above, the inspection regime becomes more regular. So there's more points of contact. The inspections become more regular. And it's designed to encourage them to identify the areas of failure or areas of concern for them to address when they have their next inspection. So there's that continuing development for them as well. And as Mrs. Stevens said, in a last worst case scenario, there is enforcement, and that could lead to closure.
At that point, I'm going to go on.
Just one small addition. I've got was Vicky's one. We've also encouraged our residents to be proactive in looking at the food rating for the premises that they are planning to eat in, and prioritise premises that have higher ratings. So if there is a restaurant or food premises that consistently gets low ratings, they're likely to go out of business and come off our statistics, even if we don't end up having to take formal enforcement action. Thank you.
Right, I'm going to draw a line there, because I'm going to...
I'm fine, just very responsible. I do just want to add is that we're very fortunate in Surrey Heath that predominantly of the whole number of the 3 and above, the vast majority of them are 5s and then 4s. So it's in the premises' interest to have a 5 because it attracts more customers. So that I just want to add that point as well.
Thank you. I'm accused of giving you all a late night. Thank you both. Thank you to all the officers for answering all the relevant questions. Thank you all the time for the paperwork. Sorry, I know you're on the last one. If you don't want to hang around for the next items, you're more than welcome to go. But if you're hanging around, then we're over to Councillor Morgan Rise for the local air quality update.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to say much on this. This is an incredibly technical report, and I would do it a disservice. So I will pass directly over to Mr. McIntosh, who will take you through the report. But I am here if there are any questions for me.
Thank you, Councillor Rice, and thank you, Chair. The paper in front of you provides an overview and status of the current air quality pollution levels within Surrey Heath, and provides an overview of some of the action that Council has been taken to improve.
Gavin, we can't hear you very much. I don't know if you need to increase the volume on your microphone or put it close to your mouth.
Can you hear me now? Is that better?
It's really quiet.
Hello.
We'll just go on. We're going to try and turn you up at this end, but we might then all go deaf. But let's see.
Is that better?
About the same.
Is that any better? Try again.
Is that better?
Yeah, I think it is. Okay, sorry about that. Carry on.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Wise. The paper in front of you provides an overview and status of the current air quality pollution levels within Surrey Heath, and provides an overview of some of the actions the Council has been undertaking to improve local air quality. So let's begin with air quality monitoring. The Environment Act 1995 requires local authorities to review and assess air quality within their area and compares measured concentrations against the air quality national objectives. The two air quality national objectives relevant to the report are nitrogen dioxide and particulate matter PM10 are set out in Table 1 of your report. SHBC has a long history of monitoring air quality across the borough. We currently have a network of 53 diffusion tubes measuring nitrogen dioxide at 51 different locations strategically placed across the borough, as set out in Figure 3 in the report, as well as a continuous analyzer measuring hourly concentrations of nitrogen dioxide and PM10 located in Castle Road, Camberley, close to the M3. Historically, some parts of Surrey Heath measured concentrations of air pollution were above the national objectives, setting out the requirement to designate an air quality management area. The current air quality management area was declared in 2002. The location and extent of the AQMA is set out in Figure 2 of your papers. Every year, Surrey Heath Borough Council reports current measures concentrations and air pollution to DEFRA, summarised within a document called the Air Quality Status Report. The 2022 data, the 2023 report, has been approved by DEFRA. Figure 4 to 9 in the report sets out the results of the monitoring, and you can see from since 2018, there's been a steady decline in measured concentrations of air pollution measures across the network. Measurements taken in 2022 indicate there's been a slight uplift in measured concentrations of both pollutants across the network, although this is thought to be because of vehicle traffic returning back to normal post the end of the pandemic. Nevertheless, Surrey Heath continues to be compliant with the national objectives, which has been the case for some time. As we've been compliant with the air quality national objectives for over 5 years, DEFRA has directed us to invoke the current air quality management area that was designated back in 2002. Therefore, we're requesting the committee to note the contents of the report and agree with the recommendation to take this report to the Licensing Committee with a recommendation to revoke the air quality management area. Moving on to the Environment Act 2021 and the implications for Surrey Heath Borough Council. The Environment Act 2021 came into force on the 1st of April 2022, along with DEFRA's air quality strategy. One of the major points of the new Act and the strategy is the addition of 2 environmental targets for fine particulate matter, PM2.5. There is no requirement for councils to monitor PM2.5, and the management of the limits are to be led by DEFRA. With the implementation of the Act and the strategy, a further requirement for local authority is to develop a local air quality strategy that focuses on improving air quality locally, as well as working to compliance with the above new targets. Surrey Heath, to be compliant with the above legislation, will therefore be seeking to develop an air quality strategy. Therefore, again, we're asking the committee again to note the contents of the report and agree with the recommendation to take a report to the Licensing Committee with a recommendation to develop an air quality strategy. Thank you. I'm hoping to answer any questions.
Thank you. I was really, hang on one second. Can you hear? There's no echo now. Good. Thank you. Wow. Thank you for that report. As you say, it's quite a lot of information to take in. I know that when we had the chair's briefing, the link wasn't working. Then it wasn't working again when the papers came out. I know it's now been updated, and I looked at it today. So hopefully, guys have been having a look at that. If not, obviously, you can look at it afterwards. So, any questions? Councillor Wilson, then Councillor Noble.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a number of questions, but I'll just start with 2 to start with. So, thank you for the report. It's really of great interest to my residents, and thank you to the officer who sent me the annual status report when I requested it, and thank you for the link to the government's air quality strategy. So the 3 documents kind of read together. So page 64, table 3, really interested in this fine particulate matter pollution, the PM 2.5, because it's identified as in the government strategy as one of the 3 most concerning pollutants, and it has a real impact on vulnerable receptors' health, like children and people with respiratory problems. So in that table, the PM 2.5 readings are all over the pollution target for the 2040, which is in this report of 10 micrograms per cubic metre. However, the government has an interim legally binding target for the start of 2028, and it's 12 micrograms per cubic metre, or a 22% reduction in the 2018 baseline. So my first question is, can we meet that target in 2028, in January 2028? Second question, going on to the annual status report, it was written in the middle of last year in June, before the Council had the capacity to monitor PM 2.5 with the new portable device. And in that annual status report, page 8 of it, it uses DEFRA background modelling of PM 2.5. That's the background model is 8.8 to 12.8 micrograms per cubic metre. And it uses that to calculate the fraction of mortality due to the exposure to that pollution, due to fine particulate pollution. And it calculates that in Surrey Heath, it's 5.9% of mortality is due to exposure to that pollution, which is higher than England as a whole, which is 5.5%, and the South East region is 5.4%. So now that the measurements have been taken, rather than having to use a background assumption from DEFRA, and these measurements are higher than the assumption that was used, does that mean that the actual fraction of mortality could be even higher than 5.9%? I hope that question makes sense. Thank you.
Of course it does. In answer to the first question, can you hear me okay at the moment, to start off with?
Yeah, we should be okay.
You should be okay, okay. With regard to meeting the 2.5 target in 2028, well, to be honest, that is an unknown sort of scenario for us. All I can say is we'll be working our hardest to try and get the concentrations down to the levels that are required by 2028. But I think we need to understand where the actual sources of pollution are in Surrey Heath when it comes down to it, because ultimately the large constituent of Surrey Heath PM 2.5 concentration is background concentrations, which unfortunately we can do our best in terms of lobbying governments to actually try and reduce those concentrations, but ultimately we have no control over those. So in terms of trying to get to those targets, we'll try our best to get there, but I can't guarantee, obviously, without looking into the future, if we will get there due to the levels of background concentrations that actually are associated in Surrey Heath. In response to the second question and the mortality figures associated with that, when you're looking at the data that's collected by the portable monitor, we can't directly look at that in terms of making health-based assessments, because the actual monitor itself doesn't have the correct accreditation to look at that. It needs much more expensive equipment to be able to make that comparison for that purpose when it comes down to it. Although it can be used to provide an indication associated with it. And in terms of the mortality burden, I said, as the reason the equipment can't actually meet the required accreditation, it would not necessarily be possible to actually determine if the burden was higher. And then we can only really work off the DEFRA background maps for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Noble, then Councillor Whitcroft.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at figure 3 on page 56 of the document, I note that the concentration of the tubes tends to be towards the west side of the borough, which I assume is because of the level of industry and general sort of traffic flow within that area. But I note that at the M3 A322 and from the M3 down on the A322 down towards Guildford direction, there is no monitoring in Lightwater on that busy stretch of road, nor on the A322 from Lightwater bypass down towards Bisley. Those are areas that do suffer quite heavy traffic. There is often problems with accessing the M3 at the A322 at Lightwater. And I know in the past the NO levels at alongside the M3, just as you approach the junction 3, has exceeded the 40 units of NO2. I don't know what the UGM is, I can't remember. But that level has been above 40 in the past. I know it's showing below 40. I wonder whether it would be possible to relocate some tubes along the M3 A322 corridor to track that level of pollution along there, as that road is used as an alternative to the Blackwater Valley as a cut through, especially when there's problems on the surrounding motorways. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Noble. In response to your question, monitoring is always useful. That's what I would say. But we always need to strike a balance when putting in monitors in terms of regarding their distribution, because at the moment we do have an extensive network. That's what I would say. And realistically, it's not possible to install monitoring every single junction. And additionally, in some cases, additional monitoring does not provide to any sort of additional information that we don't already know when it comes down to it. Although we don't have a monitor on the junction that you were talking about in terms of at the present time, concentration measures at the nearest tube, as in diffusion tube that's measuring nitrogen dioxide, some 400 metres north from the junction, can be used to provide an indication of potential pollution concentrations in that area. So I think it's tube number SH38, measuring concentrations presently around 27.4 micrograms per metre cube. That's the U grams per metre cube you see in the report there. So there's some headroom towards actual national objective of 40 at the moment. So what I'm trying to say is there that although we are definitely open to looking at diffusion tubes when it comes down to it and actually installing additional diffusion tubes in locations, sometimes it's not always possible due to the fact is they don't provide any additional information to what we already have. Because if you look at it as well, the whole of the diffusion tube network we have at the moment is still fully compliant with the national objectives, even in the worst area, which would have been the M3 and the original air quality management area when it comes down to it. And not just that as well, there's also the cost associated with monitoring that does provide some problems with us at the same sort of time. Because we're looking at roughly £40 a month. We need 12 months data to make any meaningful understanding of that data. So that sums up to £480 per year, with £90 of that being actual pounds, with the rest of it being made up of officer time. So there is also a cost associated with it. That's the reason why. In terms of the point of redistributing tubes, you generally don't look to redistribute tubes. The reason is because the diffusion tubes provide a long history of data. So the minute you move them, you lose that sort of like the actual span of time, measuring the actual concentration associated with it. So ultimately, if we were to be looking in additional tubes, it would be additional tubes associated with that. So please put some indications to me of what we would like, and we can look at that further for you. That's what I would say.
Thank you. Councillor Councillor Rise.
Thank you. Just coming in quickly that one. I've spoken with Councillor Noble on this privately as well, but it's something that I'm very keen to look at in terms of areas where I think we as members think further tubes could be of use. So it's something I am looking at, and it's something I'm having discussions with officers with. Obviously, Mr. McIntosh has set out the constraints on it, but hopefully we can be able to find a way through. But it is definitely on my agenda.
Councillor Whitcroft.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to refer to paragraph 7.1 on page 61 of the agenda papers. I'm a bit unclear as to what the last sentence of this paragraph means. Clearly, there was a problem with nitrogen dioxide levels on a part of the A331, which appear to have been mitigated by the reduction of the speed limit from 70 to 50 miles an hour along a stretch of it ending in Mitchett. The last sentence says we are starting early discussions with the project team and DEFRA to confirm what they require to sanction its removal. I'm not clear what's being removed, whether we're talking about changing the 50 miles back to the 70 miles or what, which would seem a strange thing to do, bearing in mind that it seems to have been successful in reducing nitrogen dioxide levels. That's a specific question. While I'm speaking, I'll just make a comment, which is to do with the Farnborough Airport expansion plans, which the planning committee heard all about a couple of weeks ago. And for those of you not aware, the planning committee registered an objection to those expansion plans. There is a short-term issue, or a shorter-term issue, in terms of the potential for a very considerable increase in weekend aircraft movements from Farnborough Airport. And I'm wondering, the planning committee heard that there is no particular issue at the moment, I think, with air quality related to the flying movements at the airport. But I wonder whether it's something that we should be keeping an eye on going forward if that expansion does take place. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to?
I'll come in. Councillor Whitcroft knows my position with regards to the Farnborough Airport, considering we're both members of the same ward, so he knows what my position with regards to the expansion is. I will allow Gavin to kind of provide a more technical response, but my understanding is it's near impossible for us to measure the pollution from the air, from airplanes based on the height of which they are approaching Farnborough Airport. It's not something that we as the council can do. However, I would say that it's something that I would hope that the officers are monitoring in general, and I will pass now over to Mr McIntosh to provide better answers than me.
I'll start off with the Farnborough Airport question. Thank you, councillors, for that. In terms of Farnborough Airport, that was subject to a planning application, as we're all aware, and as part of that planning application, there was an environmental impact assessment provided, an environmental statement with regard to impact to air quality. There's many other things as well as part of that, but specifically relating to air quality. Impacts were provided with regards to the plane movements, as well as also looking at the traffic associated with the people, attending the airport to take flights, etc., etc. All I can say on that point is, if you looked at the actual documents associated with the environmental statement, impacts to air quality associated with planes was negligible. That's the bottom line, is because ultimately planes are quite high, etc. So in terms of the actual contribution to local air quality from planes to Surrey Heath, it wouldn't actually necessarily be measurable. That's what the crux of that. So there was no reason to object to the planning application on those grounds. But the more significant impact associated with airports is actually the transport on the road coming to deliver the passengers, cargo, etc., to the airport. So that would be the actual major impact to Surrey Heath as a result of that. That wasn't assessed fully, in our opinion. So therefore, that was the reason that we lodged an objection based on that against the Farnborough Airport's proposal. Moving on to the first question about the A331 project and the Blackwater Valley. The 50-mile-an-hour limit has been prescribed as part of the mitigation to look at the impacts associated with nitrogen dioxide and vehicle traffic. The 50-mile-an-hour limit was only ever meant to be a temporary arrangement with regards to that, and Hampshire Highways are looking at some stage to actually revoke that 50-mile-an-hour limit associated with it. But if that is to be revoked, we need to demonstrate to DEFRA, who are the people that are actually running this project for us, that the continued compliance of nitrogen dioxide will be maintained. So we'll have to put a report together to demonstrate, if the 50-mile-an-hour limit were to be removed, what impact would that have on actual concentrations of nitrogen dioxide. So that's what we're working through at the present time with the wider Blackwater Valley group when it comes down to it. The Blackwater Valley group is based of Rushmore Council, Surrey Heath Borough Council, Hampshire Highways, and also Surrey Highways. So we're working together to make sure that any work happens in that area, be it removal of the 60-mile-an-hour limit, changing the limit in the area, will have no impact to air quality like it did previously. So that's the meaning behind that last sentence within that paragraph.
Thank you. I'm going to draw. Did you want to literally come back in, Councillor Whitcroft? Is that?
I just want to make one short observation, if I might, Chair. Thank you. Judgmentally, when one drives through parts of Mitchett, aircraft are landing at the moment fairly infrequently, shall we say, but frequently enough to create a nuisance in terms of noise. The concern is that as these aircraft approach over Mitchett, they're flying at less than 1,000 feet, and that height is decreasing very rapidly as they approach the end of the runway, which is located less than a mile from the boundary of Rushmore and Mitchett. So I don't want to spread a lot of alarm and despondency, but judgmentally, if the numbers of flights at weekends, and the proposal is to increase the weekend flights by some 10,000 a year over a period of time, I would add, then that could have some impact. And I'm just suggesting that it might be an idea just to monitor that situation should it come about, because it is clearly not very desirable having aircraft emissions at that low level. Thank you.
I'm going to take that, Councillor Wilson. I'm going to have to move it on. What I'm going to suggest is, if you have another question, if you want to email it directly to the officers, and then that can be shared within the committee. I'm just conscious of the time, and I don't want to drag it out. So if that's okay, if you want to send it and everybody can see a copy.
Yeah, that's fine.
Did you want to come back on?
Yeah, I'll come back quickly. There is a difference, and I think it's really important that we split the noise pollution and the air pollution. And as Mr. McIntosh has said, the air pollution in terms of particulates or however it's determined is negligible. With regards to noise pollution, I'm in full agreement with Councillor Whitcroft that it's a problem. I will say that this is something that I will ask officers to maintain a roving opinion on. However, monitoring air pollution of those airplanes is near impossible for us to do. But there are other areas of pollution that we are able to monitor, and we will maintain a close eye on it. I can give that assurance.
Thank you. There's two things. First one is, when we did the chair's briefing for this, it became really clear that the figures that we've got are still 2022, because they don't register them until, I think, someone correct me, August, September of this year. So what I've suggested is we move this meeting or this discussion next time round to after they've, so we actually get more up-to-date figures. So that was the suggestion moving forward. And we need to agree the recommendations, because this is going to the executive. Licensing committee. Sorry, licensing committee. That threw me. Okay, so rather than read the whole thing out, the committee is advised to resolve little 1, little 2, little 3. As a committee, are we happy to with that recommendation for the licensing committee? Okay, thank you. I remembered. Okay, thank you for hanging in there. With the finance, Vicky and Leanne, who I know is online. If we go to item 8, Q3 Revenue Monitoring Report. And
Thank you.
Leanne.
Thank you, Chair. So starting with the revenue budget report for Q3, so that is ending December 2023. We are forecasting an underspend of the year for the sort of full year of 126,000. You'll remember in Q2 we were forecasting an overspend at that point, but signalled that we were expecting it to come back in line, which it has done. There are obviously a lot of lines of data and a lot of numbers in this report, so I'm not going to go through them all in detail, but would welcome any questions and comments for us to take through to the executive. We'd also really value your sort of thoughts and comments on the format of the report. Mrs. Worsfold, who is obviously our new Deputy CFO and sitting there next to Mr. Roberts, is looking to improve the format of all our reporting going forward, and we're keen to take any sort of comments on board for that. So can I open it up to questions now, please?
Thank you again. Thank you for hanging in there. I know it's been a long night. Okay, any questions? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I've got lots of very small questions, so maybe I can just group a few of them together to start with. Page 71, and it's the car parks overall overspend of 152,000. That seems like quite a lot. Was there a problem with the original budget for this? Second question is on page 75, and it's another big number, the Camberley Town Centre underspend of 235,000. I can't understand that text to explain it. Is it possible to reword it so that a layperson could understand it? It just seems like quite a lot of money. And finally, for the moment, unless I get another stab at it, page 76 under public offices, and costs for cleaning was not included in the budget. Is that correct, that we didn't include cleaning of the offices in the budget? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I'm going to answer them in the opposite order to that you asked them. So yes, public officers, the cleaning wasn't included in the budget. In terms of the Camberley Town Centre underspend, I think it's important to note that anything in red is a lower expense or increased income. Anything in black is a higher expense or reduced income. So on this, there were some queries when the budget was being put together. There were some queries around rent increases. So we didn't budget for an increase at that point. I say we obviously this was relating to the previous budget, but it was resolved. So we are now collecting the increased rent that's more than was budgeted in the figures. So hopefully that answers that question. And then in terms of the car parking, as we know, we do need to increase maintenance costs in car parking. So you'll see underneath the I printed this out and it came out in A3, so I've got massive sheets of paper everywhere. Apologies, hang on. The car parks overspent underneath where that subtotal is, so the 152,000 that you pointed out, are all the lines of all the increased costs that obviously have contributed to that overspend. And there is a lot in there for additional works, electrical works, health and safety. We have always, I think historically, had in lower security costs than actually needed. So that has been changed for the future budget. But it is essentially undercalling the costs associated with the car park maintenance.
Thank you. And I'm just talking to Mr. Roberts. Can you clarify the last line on page 71, actually? In fact, the last two lines. So 49.6, cash collection, previous supplier went into administration, so we're now using SCC. Does that mean it's costing us more money? And the 2.5k additional transport costs for PCN income. Can you just explain, because PCN is parking charges. So it'd be interesting to see what the additional transport cost is.
Great questions.
Sorry?
Great questions. I'm actually going to pass over to Mrs. Worsfold, if that's okay, I think.
We're passing that one to Mr. Stevens, apparently.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor McIntyre. So the two elements you picked up on, I'll take them in the opposite order. Seems to be the convention for this evening. So the 2.5k additional transport costs for PCN income. When our civil enforcement officers go out and serve penalty charge notices for improper or unlawful parking, that clearly means they need to be sat in a vehicle and they need to be driving around the borough to be able to enforce. So that's effectively what that is. That's additional fuel costs for the patrols that they're undertaking. In relation to the 49.6k, yes, our previous cash collection supplier did go into administration. As an interim measure, we are using the County Council supplier, but we are going through a procurement exercise to find a far more cost-effective option.
Thank you. Sorry, I hijacked that one. So, Mr. Wilson, who was... Anyone else have any questions? Oh, they suddenly all went up. Okay, I'll go for Councillor O'Mahony first and then Councillor Noble.
7, Trade City. It says overall overspend 2k, and then below it in red, it's 10k. Is that just a typo?
Sorry, Councillor O'Mahony, can you just repeat where you're looking?
Page 77. Nearly at the bottom of the page, you've got Trade City, overall overspend.
An excellent question again. I don't know the answer to that question, if I'm honest. I don't know whether Mrs. Worsfold does.
Yeah, no problem. In the detail of that, you've actually got the total of Trade City is the 2,000, which is made up of a 10,000 underspend and a 12,000 overspend, which is just underneath it.
Okay. Does that answer your
But
question?
could you hit that? I didn't hear any of that. Could you say it?
Yeah, okay. Where you've got the 2,000 overspend for Trade City as a whole, underneath that you've got a 10,000 underspend and then a 12,000 overspend, which is the net 2,000.
Right, okay. Thank you.
It does come back to a question I know you've got a note of, and I know Mr. Watson asked us, would we like the papers issued in a different format? And I think it does. Some of this does beg the question that some of it's not easy to read. So maybe that is a feedback that it is difficult, and maybe we try and make it a little bit more easy to understand. I know it's a question I know you had, and I know Mr. Watson mentioned it in our meeting, and he emailed me as well. So it's obviously something we will take on board and we will try and do. Councillor Noble.
Thank you, Chair. I think you teed me up quite nicely on that one. Because my observation is I do like this new format. It does make good reading, but I don't think it's necessary to have the figures in the narrative column as well as in the total column. It just causes more opportunity for error, so I would suggest that we just take that out going forward. But otherwise, I like the layout.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. So page 79, at the top of that page, 1.7, base budget review. So I'm just wondering how that interfaces with the new MTFS and the base budget review targets in that. So are the new targets, because there's for 2024-25, the new target is 400,000 saving, and for 25-26, it's 200,000 saving. So there's some savings or efficiencies that have already been achieved in this report. So does that mean that part of the next year's MTFS has already been achieved, or are the new savings on top of these savings? So 350,000 for next financial year plus another 400,000?
Yes, yes and no. Obviously, the MTFS target there is related to the targets that we had in for the previous MTFS. So this is all based on, this is at Q3, so it's all based on the figures that were in the MTFS at Q3. The base budget review figures, there are obviously last year's base budget review figures. They don't correlate to the budget that we've just submitted in full council. What we have done, obviously in the budget process, is go through a really granular level of what costs we're expecting to come through. So in the base budget review, well, in the budget and the MTFS that we have just approved, we have different figures in the base budget review that we're going to need to find going forward. So some of these figures will already have been incorporated into the new MTFS, but won't be reflective in this paper because it's obviously looking at the historic figures that we have. You will see, obviously, on in tables 1.2 and 1.5 is where we've made up and can show that the budget that was set for 23-24, how that's then changed with the base budget review savings in there to us our current working budget, which is obviously what we're then forecasting the variance against for the year-end figures.
Thank you, I understand. Thanks.
Okay, if no one else has got any other questions, we've got, I think we're just recommending this back to executive with any comments that we've made, yeah, which you've obviously noted. So thank you for that. So that takes us to the item 9, which is the Q3 capital monitoring report. Over to you, Councillor McIntyre.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, as the Chair said, this is the capital budget based on Q3. So again, December 2023. It's against the approved budget of just under 16 million, with just over 25% of that or sort of spent, we're forecasting to spend in this financial year, which means that we are looking to reprofile 7.5-ish million out of the 7.8 million underspend into to future years. Again, a number of facts in here and a number of figures. So I would welcome any questions and feedback on the paper, please.
Thank you. Open to questions. Who's first? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. A short question. If you walk around this building, you see on the walls the new council strategy with its 5 priorities so that everyone knows what they're working towards. I was just wondering if any consideration has been given when we're reporting on lists of capital projects to tie each project into one of the 5 priorities so that we can see how it's working towards the council strategy. Thank you.
I think that's a good comment, Councillor Wilson. I think that's definitely something we should be doing. I mean, certainly going forward, every business case that comes to executive and council where relevant in terms of capital spend will be looked at on a case-by-case basis and on its own business case, and clearly that will have the link into the sort of the plan and the strategy. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't and couldn't report this in a similar way. So we'll take that on board. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? No. Okay. Final. I'm just making sure that I've covered off my questions, actually. I think they've been answered. Yep. Okay. Fine. So if we've got no questions, we have to also agree to recommendations of any questions back to the executive, which we have obviously noted. Nothing else on that item, which is good. Thank you for hanging in there. I'm sorry it took a little bit. Maybe we'll put you up first next time. Mix it up a bit.
Everyone will be awake and ask more questions.
So thank you for your time. So the last thing is the work programme, and I just go to that now. There isn't one, because we need to do that for the next municipal year. Yeah.
So I guess it's asking the committee whether they
Okay.
would like to see anything incorporated, but then seeing it.
Yeah, okay.
Delegate it to
So we've obviously got the normal agenda. We're going to have an extra meeting next municipal year, and obviously we'll mix up the portfolio holder updates within that schedule. But if there's anything else that the committee would like to see on that agenda that hasn't been seen, you want to do more of a deep dive on, that we can build into that work programme. Now's the time to sort of speak and see if there's anything you have any particular feelings for. Councillor Mears.
Thank you. I can't quite remember when the new car parking charge coming into effect, but if there's been enough time for those to settle in and we see what the impact on that has been on revenue, it'd be good to see an update on how the car parking strategy has gone, income of the car parks, users of the car parks, and which car parks in particular have either increased or declined in use. Thank you.
1st of April, I would suggest, is when it goes up, yes? Or that's when it gets... Yeah, okay. So
probably
6 months. Yeah, okay. So if we can maybe look at that in 6 months' time. So if you want to add that. Anything else at this point? You don't have to make a decision now if you want to come back with anything else. Maybe we're going to move the monitoring report as well, so maybe we give that a little bit more time next time as well, because I know there was some interest in that. And anything else you want to feed back, that would be brilliant. So if there is nothing else, I'm apologising that we ran over a little bit, but I think it was fair to say that it was a really interesting conversation as referenced the portfolio holders. And Councillor Wilson, sorry I had to cut you off, but if you want to send them questions to the officers, I'm sure they'll be there to answer it, and I'm sure we'd like to see the answers as well.
Yeah, no problem. I'll do that.
Thank you. Everybody who's online and here, have a good rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you.